Recently, my girlfriend has been playing this game called Darkest Dungeon, and I've been watching her play it. I knew about the game, but aside from its unique art style, it wasn't really a game I thought I'd like. It's turn-based, which I hate, it's also an RPG, which I've never really been a fan of, and finally, it's a dungeon crawler. Doing the same thing over and over in a game really isn't my jam, aside from Vampire Survivors, but that game has gambling in it, so I'll let it slide. Anyways, after hours of watching her conduct the actions of weird little guys, I got Stockholmed into it, and I ended up downloading it for myself. And guys, I have to admit something. It's actually really, really good. Turns out there's a lot more to the game than it seems. It's way deeper than just picking random characters and walking forward, and the way that it adds depth to the formula is extremely unique. So join me on this episode of RatedEm where we delve into Darkest Dungeon and see what makes it so enticing. Before we start, subscribe if you haven't already. I talk about video games on this channel, whether it's reviewing them or looking back on them, so if that interests you, subscribe. Also be sure to check out my second channel for variety gaming content, from playing games to reacting to gaming videos. If you like Ludwig or Mr. T Lexify, you're gonna love what I post there. Finally, if you're looking for a clean but powerful gaming energy mix, check out w.gg and use code RatedEm at checkout for 10% off your order. Now, let's begin. Darkest Dungeon is a dungeon crawler roguelike RPG where you get a letter telling you that you have inherited an ancient manor. The thing is, your father who owned it previously opened a gateway to hell and a bunch of monsters have inhabited it. It's up to you to recruit heroes for hire to take on the evil forces and reveal what hides within. Now you've probably heard me say dungeon crawler roguelike RPG and thought, but wait, you've said on multiple occasions you don't like RPG games. And to that I say, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of those kinds of games. But there is a few things about Darkest Dungeon that make it so unique and interesting to play. The first thing I'll talk about is recruiting heroes. In Darkest Dungeon, it is not you going into the depths of the game's multiple areas, but rather various characters that you can hire. These range from knights, plague doctors, grave robbers, and even people who transform into wolf-like creatures. There's 16 different hero types, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. Highwaymen have more range attacks than a leper will, but plague doctors can cure poison debuffs, stuff like that. This leads directly into the main chunk of the game, which is exploring the game's various areas. You'll select an area, pick which heroes you might need to fend off the evil that lurks within, and then set off on your journey. There's two things that make selecting your heroes such a thoughtful decision. I'll get to the second point in a bit, but the first thing I can discuss here, which is placement. Depending on the attacks and abilities the heroes have, they'll prefer a position in your lineup. If you don't satisfy that request, they'll essentially become useless in combat, as none of their moves will reach the targets. Before you set off on your journey, you'll have to purchase resources such as food, various medicines, tools, and most importantly, torches. Torches are required for the game's light mechanic, where the darker this torch at the top of the screen gets, the less benefits you'll receive. When exploring an area, you'll mainly be doing two things, fighting or looting. Let's discuss combat first. Combat is turn-based, and turn order is determined by your character's speed stats as well as the enemies. I don't think I need to explain how turn-based combat works. You pick your action, then someone else goes, then they pick an action, then someone else goes, etc, etc. Okay, I've been holding back this entire time, but now I think it's a good time to reveal Darkest Dungeon's main gimmick, and arguably one of the coolest features in all video games ever, the stress and quirk system. As you progress on your journeys, your characters will get stressed. This can happen due to the torch being too dark, certain enemy abilities, looting something that might not be what you're looking for, literally walking backwards accidentally, skipping a character's turn. Almost everything in this game will stress your adventurers out. In combat, if they reach 100 out of 200 on their stressometer, they'll snap, revealing a hidden personality trait that most of the time will be negative. Some characters will become abusive, some will become paranoid, there's a bunch of traits. Mainly, these traits will affect the character possessing them, like paranoid characters will skip their turn involuntarily, they'll fuck up the line order, or they'll refuse to be healed. However, these traits will also affect the other party members. Mostly, one character being stressed out will just stress out the other party members each turn. But some traits, such as the abusive trait, will directly affect specific party members by doing damage to them directly. Sometimes though, stressing your characters out isn't a bad thing. Some characters that reach 100 stress will power through the challenges and become virtuous, where they will not only lower their own stress by a large amount, but reduce the teammate's stress every turn. However, the chances of a character becoming virtuous or becoming stressed out are pretty much 50-50, so it's up to you to either reduce the stress beforehand with certain abilities, or let it build up and possibly have that character calm down all the other party members. Now you're probably wondering what the other 100 points of stress are for. If a character reaches 200 stress, do stressed out characters become virtuous? Do virtuous characters become super virtuous? Nope, heart attack. If a character hits 200 stress, they will die instantly from a heart attack. There's no good here, there's only bad. Now discussing quirks, and yes, this is the second part of why team composition is so important that I mentioned earlier. Depending on how stressed out your characters are at the end of a quest, they'll have the chance to gain either a positive or a negative quirk. Positive quirks can range from a tactician quirk, which will have a hero do 15% extra damage while exploring a certain area, or the tough quirk, which gives them 10% extra health. But negative quirks can suck big time. They can be on a scale of, oh, whatever, like slow reflexes, which removes 1 point of their speed stat, to shit like compulsive, which will have characters automatically opening up chests, which, as we mentioned earlier, can have negative effects when opened. They could be at like 70 stress, open up a bookcase, read some disturbing shit, and then snap into being abusive. But in my opinion, that's what makes Darkest Dungeon so great. Watching one of your characters say nothing must be left opened when they see a chest and feeling that wave of anxiety over the result makes it so unbelievably thrilling. And it's an interaction between you and the game that no other video game can recreate. It's a similar feeling when you realize a character just snapped only for them to become virtuous and defy your expectations. The wave of relief that moment gives me feels amazing. It also just makes the game feel so much more alive. When characters make their own decisions, it only leads me into more immersion, which should be the ultimate goal of video games. Get the player immersed and do it through enticing gameplay. Anyways, back to explaining the game. These quirks aren't permanent, so if you have a really good character but they steal every single good item they see for themselves, you can send them to the sanitarium to remove these quirks, or if they have a disease that affects their stats, you can remove them there too. In terms of relieving stress in characters so they don't go into the next quest on the verge of tears, you can send them to various exhibits to give them some alone time. Let them drink at the bar or have them pray at the church. However, repeat exposure to the same stress relief exhibit can cause quirks to emerge in your characters, like if you send a character to the brothel too many times, they'll develop a parasocial relationship with a sex worker and will refuse to relieve stress anywhere but the brothel. Oh, Lucy, you little fucking pervert. Heroes can also be recruited with these quirks already established, such as those who are extremely religious. They'll refuse to go anywhere but the church. This also works inversely. Known cheats are not allowed to gamble, or someone who has demonomania will not enter the church. On top of that, sometimes your characters will get a little too carried away with their stress relief and vanish. I've mostly seen this occur with the people I send to the bar. They'll often get too drunk and walk into the woods, and this is a legitimate gameplay element where there's a chance they won't come back. You're probably hearing all of this and thinking, wow, this game is difficult. And yeah, it kind of is, but it's not difficult in the sense of you can't do it, but there's a lot of stuff in your way that you have to navigate around. This game is really tough, yeah, but it's not like Elden Ring where the challenge is directly in your way. There's just little things that weigh down on your ability to win, but when you pull through an adventure with all your characters alive despite them wanting to interact with every little thing, and one of your characters beat another over the head like 6 times because they're abusive, yeah, it feels good. It feels really good to defy that challenge. The final thing I want to discuss is permadeath. Characters that die in your run die for good, and while you can just go and recruit another leper after the first one dies, it can sometimes get really personal when a character who is practically carrying your team dies. I'm actually emotionally invested in my girlfriend's save file. I treat it like reality TV. When she told me her abomination died, I responded saying this is the worst day of my life. The quirk system and the permadeath feature both blend together to only heighten the level of immersion that this game brings. They add a lot of character to, well, your characters, and it's something I deeply love about the game. There's only 2 real issues I have about the game, and they're both technical things. First is that on console, the game controls like piss. I think this game would have really benefited from having a cursor to select things like Black Ops 4. I know that's a really weird comparison, but that game does the controller cursor thing quite well. There's just too many buttons for the things on screen, and I often find myself having to press random buttons in an attempt to remind myself what does what. The second thing is that the PC version runs at like 20 or 30 FPS, while the console version looks beautiful. However, this might just be an issue with the version that's on the PC Game Pass, and I intend to purchase the game on Steam to see if the issue is still relevant. If I can remind myself to do so, I'll leave my answer as the pinned comment, but if anyone owns the game on Steam and their game looks like the console footage, please let me know and maybe I'll just pin your comment instead. But yeah, it looks really choppy on PC for some reason. Aside from those minor 2 issues, I legitimately cannot think of a single negative thing about this game. I actually think this is probably one of the most perfect games to come out in the past decade, and if you haven't played it, even if you don't like turn-based games like me, I highly suggest you give it a shot. As mentioned previously, it's on Game Pass, not just PC Game Pass, but it's also on the console Game Pass, and the footage you've been seeing is how the game looks on the original Xbox One as well as the Series X, so if you haven't upgraded yet, don't worry, the game looks just as beautiful. Alright, I'll shut up now. Go play it. The game's incredible. You have no excuses. Give it a shot.